Hi, my name's Tony and I'm from the SUP Company, and I'm here to tell you a little bit more about the all-new 2020 Starboard 14x24 Sprint in wood carbon. So here it is, brand new for 2020, the Starboard 14x24 Sprint in wood carbon. And we'll come on to the wood carbon bit towards the end of the video because it's pretty key to this model and really the Sprint lineup in 2020. But overall, this board, it may have dropped an inch from last year, but do you know what? It's just as stable. It's even faster and it is really, really rewarding to paddle. The 14x24 Sprint, been paddling now for a couple of years. When Starboard said they're going to drop an inch off of this, yeah, slightly hesitant to be honest with you. But the board just feels insane. It's a little bit livelier, but just as stable. And the main reason for that is the volume and the way in which they've played with that in the board, but also the thickness in the rails and how they've increased that overall. But look, let's run you through from the nose towards the tail of the board and talk you through the refinements that's been made in 2020. Overall, as I say, the board's dropped an inch in width, and that's really helped reduce the wetted surface area on the board quite a bit. It also means that the paddle in every stroke you're going to make is much nearer the center line of the board, which ultimately means all of that effort is going to propel you forwards that little bit quicker. The board though as a whole, the nose is running a lot more volume than we've seen previously further forwards. That's helping really a lot with stability. The rails on the board are much thicker, much more pronounced on the board, and that, particularly in small chop, plays a massive factor, and it makes the sprints incredibly stable for a board that drops straight into, you know, a flat water category. And if you look at Starboard's performance offering with the Sprint, the Allstar, I mean, everyone's heard of the Allstar, and then the Ace, the downwind focus board, you could be forgiven for kind of writing the Sprint off as just a flat water weapon. And it's not. There is so much more to a Starboard Sprint that meets the eye. And it is its ability to deal with small chop and crosswind situations. And it is quicker in those conditions than a Starboard All-Star, hands down. You know, it's important when you are paddling the Sprint to actually get the most out of those raised rails and that volume by bringing your weight much further forward to actually drive everything forward and pierce chop ultimately. And in doing so, that when you actually submerge and put more of the rail in the water, it's actually making the board far more stable. We've got a number of customers that actually have the 14x25 Sprint in hybrid carbon that we did exclusively with Starboard last year as a limited edition model. And the board, you know, getting those paddlers to actually bring their weight much further forward on the board has worked really, really well. And they found very, very quickly that the board is much more stable. And all of that basically tallies and plays true with the 2020 model. It's just on a narrower width and it's much quicker as a result. As you work your way back down the board though, you'll see there's still this ridge in the Starboard Sprints. That there is helping displace water across the deck, meaning it's not dropping back into the standing area. It also actually plays into a factor that it actually makes the board much stiffer in the forward sections because you've got that ridge there working to keep the board very, very rigid. As you work back into the standing area though, this is where one of the big changes has been made. The standing area has been made bigger. They've dug it out slightly further forward so you can get your weight much further forward, as I've just said, in terms of helping increase the stability in small chop. But also you can actually make full use of the width of the board because the standing area has actually been dug out and they've basically recessed the rails. Still just as strong as in previous years with the UD carbon reinforcement they've placed through the rails, but it just means that you can make full use of that width and be much more stable as a platform. Running your way back down the board though, 2 years ago when the Sprint in this kind of width was introduced, for someone of my build at 100 kilos, it's just perfect. But one of the complaints I had, probably, not wishing to nitpick, but it was quite aggressive, the tray, as it raised out towards the tail of the board. That got better in 2019, And now, to be honest with you, the transition in the 2020 model is so much smoother. Your footwork is much kinder as a result, because you can place your feet in confidence that they're basically going to find the deck of the board when you expect to, because previously it always came up very, very aggressively and you almost found yourself walking uphill as you went down the back of the board. That's not the case really in the Sprint in 2020. It's much more intuitive underfoot. As you work your way back down the board, there's no chance of you running off, because there's a nice texture change underfoot to a diamond cut crocodile skin deck pad there on the tail with a raised kick pad. When you are on the tail of the board, it's very stable underfoot. A lot of confidence to really submerge the tail and get a lot of the board out the water, make your boy turn, bring your weight very quickly forwards, get the board down, and it just wants to accelerate and get going, get up to speed very, very quick. And with the Sprint overall, it's its user friendliness, and it can be a little bit intimidating, I think, when you are on a race board of this ilk for the first time. But the nice thing with the Starboard Sprint is you get a lot of its performance very, very early on, and you don't have to work very hard to get the best out of this board. It just comes on very, very easily. But look, let's roll the board over and we'll drop it on to its rail so you can have a look on that underside. And it's worth noting, actually, when I do pick it up, let's probably just pause for a second and talk about the wood carbon construction. And the wood carbon, while I'm not a big fan of the name, what I am liking is the weight. The hybrid carbon, yeah, there was quite a difference between the hybrid carbon in terms of its overall weight and the full carbon sandwich. And you could almost justify the price difference, bearing in mind the carbon composite, the carbon sandwich construction is running at almost 35% more than the hybrid carbon was. The wood carbon construction is much lighter than the hybrid carbon, the outgoing construction, and it's much, much closer to the carbon composite. I mean, you're talking around half, maybe 0.6 of a kilo difference. And given that there's still that 35% price difference to go to a full carbon composite board, it's quite a hard decision now. And I think it's one that is quite hard to justify ultimately. And I'd probably choose a wood carbon sandwich over and above the full carbon as a result. And I'd save my money. But look, let's take you through the rest of the board. On the underside, the nose, you've still got a very slightly pronounced, if you like, dipping nose rocker back in, which is engaging like a knife and locking the nose in and helping tracking no end. That then comes back to a forward flat section here, generates an awful lot of lift, lots and lots of acceleration out of the board, but engaging that nose still with the tracking. And then that runs into a deep center concave, which generates, loads of secondary stability on these side planes here. And it's one of the unique things with the Sprint in that where you're stood in the board as opposed to on it, like with the Allstar, given the width of, say, a 14 by 24.5 Allstar, this board at 24 wide is much more stable. It's comparable to a 26-inch wide Allstar. It's that stable as a platform. The board though, the concave just runs all the way back down to the US fin box. That there flattens out quite a bit, and it just means that the board's going to slide a little bit easier when you do come to make a boy turn on around that US fin box. The fin that comes with the board is Starboard's proven Race Ultra. It's quite a big fin, it adds a lot of lateral stability to the board. Personally, I'm choosing to run a VMG time trial in my board this year. I just really enjoy the tracking and how that improves the performance of the board overall. But if you are just looking for a one-stop solution, the Race Ultra is a good stop. Overall though, the wood carbon, 14 by 24 Sprint, do you know what? Yeah, I'm sold. I love it. Really rewarding to paddle, as I say. And yeah, if you're after a performance flat water board that's not going to break the bank and still remain very light, really rewarding to paddle, then the 14 by 24 Sprint has to be on your shortlist in 2020. Thanks for watching our video. If you've got any questions about what you've seen, why not give us a call in the shop or head over to thesupco.com. To check out our next video, why don't you click on up here, but to get a notification, why not subscribe to our channel up here.